look up and being aware of the space. It's made from 1,000 paper cones. I pulled handmade sheets of paper, wrapped them into a cone shape, and then coated them with a paper clay slip. Once the cones are made in the studio, or all the parts are made in the studio, they go in boxes, off they go, I ship them, I meet the boxes, and then I'm on site and actually building 3 days, 4 days, or 5 days, depending on the size of the installation. Everything's attached in a very simple method. It's a simple dip and stick. I create a paper clay mixture, an adobe mixture, and have that in a bucket near me, and I'm dipping each component into that mixture and then attaching from the base and moving up. I'll come back to that so that I can at least answer any of the technical questions that you might have about the adobe. So just take you through some source slides so that conceptually you have a little better understanding about what I'm thinking about. I look at nature, the formal beauty of nature, how species grow, how plants grow. I'm interested in nature, interacting with nature. So wind or the rise of a river as it deposits its debris around an impediment, or the drip of water and mineral as it makes a stalagmite or a stalactite. So this is just to give you some conceptual background in terms of what I'm thinking about. I'm interested in the power of nature, the resilience of nature, and the splendid awe. And for me, clay is an earth material. For everyone, it's different. Some of us respond to clay in a decorative way. For me, it's an earth material, and it feels appropriate to be looking at ecological observations and then using this earth material. It's also very responsive and has a great memory. But ultimately, I know that I'm interested in who we are as humans living here, and I'm ever more fascinated at looking at nature and finding metaphor as it connects to thinking about who we are and how we use space, and how sensitive we are about using space, or the lack of sensitivity. And within nature, I know that I'm not illustrating. I know that I don't want to recreate it or illustrate nature, but rather, and as well, I know that I don't want to romanticize it, like the Thomas Moran painting on the right. But really, I'm interested in the true beauty of the sea and the harshness found. I'll take you through 4 more woven installation projects. This was built for the Edge Gallery in Denver. Again, it uses the weaving process. I'm going to take you through both crochet, weaving, and assemblage, all these different methods that I construct with. And again, some are fired and non-fired. I'll try to identify that so that you can begin to see those parts and so that they pop out. This, there's a central support limb. I collect from the power company as they trim the power lines, so I'm not actually cutting, but actually recycling. Trying to make good choices about my materials. That limb goes through the center from floor to ceiling with a clay pillar there, providing even yet more tension. The warp strings are an upholsterer's thread. They're connected by little tags at the bottom and pulled tight to the ceiling. And then I can create the shape by putting a hoop in the form. I can take an embroidery hoop, or I can create my own hoop, whatever shape that might be, oval or round. Put it inside those warp strings, and it actually pushes the strings out, and I'll show you a good technical image so that you can see what that's like. And I can move that hoop up and down so that I can weave with ease. I can also control the hardness of the form. And I do that by putting an adhesive in with the paper clay mixture. And an adhesive could be as simple as a white glue, or a wallpaper paste, or Portland cement. And I like to use up to 10%. And I'm thinking about that it's dry, and that I want some firmness. And if I want it to be permanent, or if it's selling, I'll make it as hard as possible. You can actually tap the weave, and it's very, very durable. And that's always quite a surprise to everyone, how much durability I can actually get by putting an adhesive into the mixture. So these are non-fired woven pieces. Another woven piece, installation of 3 components. I'm sorry, I cut the third one off here on the side. But it was installed in an octagonal orthogonal space at University of Washington. I was a guest professor one semester, and it's a beautiful 8-sided gallery space there. And I teamed up with the horticulture department, and they were doing a study on invasive plant materials. And so I actually helped harvest and bring a pond-side area back to a natural balance by harvesting loosestrife and bringing it back into the gallery, dipping it into the paper clay mixture, and weaving away. It was about 25 feet tall. Another piece, another woven piece, 16 limb forms connected to the ceiling. I just have a simple molding system that screws right to the ceiling. It's just a limb with a notch cut out of it, and that screws right to the ceiling, and then the limb is connected to it. And then I can weave, and in this case, I've woven just to the base of the stick. All these warp strings gathered at the bottom. And to create tension in this piece, it was just a simple pinch pot. The pinch pot was nestled in the bottom of the warp strings that provided that tension needed to weave, and would dip my materials and weave on upward. Thinking about the gentleness, the simplicity of the space in creating that same sort of energy for the viewer. Back to the North Carolina project, 4 forms, woven and site installed, 4 layers, so it was a weave, and then on top of that, another layer of weave, and then again the 3rd and the 4th. And as you can imagine, I was on a cherry picker for half of the installation, moving right up to the ceiling. And back to the Manchester craft steel piece. These were the paper cones coated in paper clay slip and then assembled. So for me, the paper clay slip is an opportunity to construct in any way. I mean, our conceptual language takes us where we need to go, and I just developed and invented what I needed to invent, and that's what we do. As our ideas grow and we mature and diversify and move, we begin to invent all these structural possibilities, and that's exactly what happens with my work. A piece built for the Fuller Craft Museum in Brockton, Massachusetts. This is a pretty good example of the diversity of forms that I am making currently. Some are fired, some are non-fired. So for instance, the image on the left, it's just cut off, but you can see a form, a bud form. It's just the limb is coated with all these bud forms, and those are fired. And then the burst of form right next to it, it's a little cotton square dipped into paper clay and then wrapped in a little conical shape. I make hundreds and hundreds of parts. In boxes they go, I meet them, and there again I site install. This piece was so much about growth being influenced, growing towards growth. A burst of form, using a variety of different petal and bud forms, some dipped fabric, some paper clay slip trail. I'll take you through this in just a minute, so if you're interested in any of the technical information, I can walk you through that. So I slip trail on plaster slabs and then pop them off. I use 20, 30, or 40% cellulose in the slip. That provides me strength. The more cellulose I add to the slip, the stronger it is, until you get to the 45% mark, and then you've actually decreased the strength of your clay. So it becomes, when it dries, it's really, really hard. But then you have the choice. You can fire it. So if I'm going to fire the objects, then I'm using a true clay body, to be perfectly honest. It's a true clay body with clay, silica, and flux, so that it can vitrify. If I'm not firing, I don't use a full recipe, a full clay recipe. I'll just use EPK plus cellulose. So it's just dependent on what I want, whether I want the durability, the edge, the vitrification gives me, or if I want the softness that unfired forms have. I'm also a paper maker, and so I pull petals, forms, pull or pour. I'll take you through that in just a minute. And the paper is fantastic